Good night, Mr. Navarro. I am Luis Ochoa. I'm a student of Zamorano, and I want to do some questions about the most important philosophers of the Middle Ages. And can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure, I will. My name is Daniel Navarro. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ochoa. Well, I'm a student graduated on philosophy. I come from Guam University, that's in Nicaragua, in Managua specifically. And it'll be an honor for me to answer all of your questions.
Okay. You know that we have some philosophers of Middle Ages. And what are some of the reasons that philosophers of the Middle Ages believed that the reason should go hand by hand with religion?
Well, in my opinion, reason and faith have each been considered to be important sources of justification for religious beliefs. This is because both have the same epistemic function. It has been an interest to many philosophers and theologians how they're much related. Some people believe that they can be no conflict in relating both faith and reason, but others believe that they are unique and that they should be seen apart from each other. There are many examples of these philosophers that I can recall. For example, Avicenna is one of them. Averroes, Thomas de Aquino, Kierkegaard, and Locke. Well, those are the philosophers I think I can recall right now. Well, can you continue, please?
And who was Avicenna and what was his main belief according to religion and reason?
Well, Avicenna, he was a Muslim philosopher, and in my opinion, he's one of the best in the Muslim culture. He was a very famous physician. He was a philosopher also, mathematician and astronomer. One of his famous books that I can remember is the Canon, which is related to medicine, by the way, and advances in diseases like tuberculosis and new types of drugs. His philosophical beliefs were related to those stated by the Aristotelian tradition and related to the Muslim tradition. And he believes that philosophy was related to religion. Keep on, please. Next question.
Okay, you know that Avicenna is some of these philosophers that think that God was the motor to the existence of all things on earth. He thinks that God was the motor that create all. And what was Avicenna's main theory and explain what did he believe that God was the motor to the existence of all things on earth?
Well, this philosopher was primarily concerned with the understanding of the self-existence in the world in relation to contingency. He wanted to create a system that accords with the religious existence of the Muslim culture. In his studies, as I most remember, is that he articulates that God is the necessary existence to lay the foundations for all theories, intellectual movements. This was to make a relation between religion and philosophy, and the way interpret the Quran. Please.
Okay, and Averroes was another of the most important philosophers. And who was Averroes? What were some of his jobs, and what was the theory that he introduced to the eastern part of the world?
Well, Averroes was a Muslim philosopher, and he was named as the most influential Muslim philosopher. This was because he inherited the Muslim philosophy tradition to the West. He studied linguistics and also scholastic theology. Also, he was a doctor because he studied medicine, and he was a writer because he wrote many books explaining all of his thoughts and theories. And finally, a philosopher.
Okay, Mr. Navarro, and you know that in those ages, the philosophy going hand by hand with religion, and you know that the church uh, have some problems with the philosophy. What was the main problem that church had in the Middle Ages, and what was the solution that they gave to amend those problems?
Well, the Middle Ages were enormous of people for the Europeans and the church. One of the major problems that the church had was a new concept called scholasticism, which they strongly disapproved because they thought that this movement would undermine faith and promote heresy. But although church didn't want this movement to promote, there were philosophers, as I mentioned before, that left its acceptance.
And was the church in favor that philosophers gave a new explication to religion think, and what they did in those cases if the philosophers were against religion?
Well, mainly they did not agree that people should believe that they were new theories or ideas that proved differently that God was the supreme being that makes all happen because this will change the way that people thought and lose all of the power that they had over the religious population. So, in cases in which philosophers stated that they were against religion, they will kill them. That is why many of the philosophers tried and related reasoning to religion. Well, I think that, I don't know. What's your next question?
Okay, and the philosophers of Middle Ages, you know, that have some factors or some characteristics that state that these were, and which were some of these factors that state that these were some of the most important philosophers of the Middle Ages.
Well, in my opinion, that made all of the philosophers famous. And one of the most important in the Middle Ages was so the work that they provided to prove that religion could go in hand with reasoning. And they did this in a time in which the way of thinking of people was that God did everything and the only way of explaining things was with faith. So that all the philosophers come and try to change the way people viewed the world. In this time with all of their work was a great accomplishment.
Okay, Mr. Navarro, and when I was searching about Thomas, that is one of the most important philosophers of the Middle Ages, uh, I don't understand very well the way of thinking of him. Can you please tell me what is your opinion of the Thomas way of thinking, and what did people think we when he stated his theory?
Well, I believe that this way of thinking is that one in which Thomas explained how religion and reason way related using Aristotle and Plato's ways of thinking. He stated that the objective of knowledge is its being and its process, and this is called moderate idealism. Also, that God was the creator of the world, and that man was the best creation that God has and gave it a way of thinking to discover all of the mysteries in the world.
Okay, Mr. Navarro, and with all the knowledge that you have, in your opinion, which is the most important philosopher in the Middle Ages, and explain your statement?
Well, for me, the most important philosopher was Averroes. You want to know why? Because he was one of the most important, the most prepared philosophers with studies in religion, medicine, in writing, also in the studies of past philosophers, and he worked hard to find a relation between the Muslim religion and the nature of philosophy in search of the truth. All of his studies were such a success that he went to the western side of the world to be studied.
And Another of the most important philosophers of Middle Ages was Pedro Abelardo. Pedro Abelardo had some concepts of universe that I think don't it's isn't be very well to understand. What do you think of the way of thinking that Abelardo had of the concepts of the universe, and what will you change of this theory?
Hmm. Well, this is a hard one. Well, I think maybe Pedro Abelard was a very great philosopher. His way of thinking, of my opinion, was very special, and this is because he believed that to find the truth about the fact, people should think very rigorously about it and try to find all of the aspect about it to understand it very well. He stated that there was the existence of a universal controller that made everything happen in a certain way. I will not change anything in his way of thinking because it was a way that inspired nowadays knowledge to see that all of his mistakes were corrected to get to the truth about the religion and the reason. Well, and I hope, well,
Okay,
we have another question.
no, Mr. Navarro, thank you very much. I think that that was the most important of the interview, part of the interview, and I know that I have some problems with the connection of the video call, but thank you very much and have a nice good night. See you, Mr. Navarro.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure to answer all of your questions. Don't worry. Thank you.
Bye.